So I would like to start a little bit about me, who I am and where I come from. So I came to Turtle Island around 2010 as international student to pursue my PhD. My background is more in veterinary and animal sciences and nutrition. Here in Turtle Island, I can say I feel most connected to land, water, animal, plants, and people in Hollow Water First Nation community in Manitoba. That's the place that I like to call home. For the past few years, I've been working with few First Nation communities and individuals, as well as non-for-profit organizations and academic institutions such as University of Manitoba, University of Winnipeg, applying for funding and different areas. Areas such as environment, climate change, entrepreneurship, cultural and healing, education, economic development. And I've been successful in quite a few of those applications. So right now I'm a postdoctoral fellow in University of Manitoba, working with Waniskatan in few projects related to environment, food, and health. A little bit about what this session is all about. We are going to talk in general about how to find the correct or the right funding to support your project goals. This session, the morning session, will be about 2 hours long from now to 1 p.m. And then we will have about 1 hour lunch break. And then we will have another session at 2 to 4 p.m. After the introduction, after we get all your messages, I would like to more know about what your expectation from this workshop will be. If you have any possible experience in terms of proposal writing, and then what are your community and organizations' priorities, and how these priorities and how, will actually shape your idea to go and look for fundings. And then how to find different types of funding for that idea and figure out if you're eligible for that specific funding that we found. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna go back to here. All right, so next slide, baby. Okay, so let us know what your expectation of this workshop is. I start with my own expectation. I really like this workshop to be as interactive as possible. I know that this is a different world we are living right now, so things are very changed. But I like to do the minimum talking and see most of your messages coming in. And also I would like to talk a little bit about the strength of the community that I feel the most home for me is, like, which is Hollow Water First Nation. And it is when I go there, I remember all the responsibilities that I have. To the environment, to land, water, animals, people, and also to relationships that I have to my family and to the people in the community. So next slide, please. So I'm not sure, I can't see the messages. So are people participating, Becky? Can you see those messages? Okay. I'm seeing some of your messages. Yeah, we have people from all across Turtle Island, Alberta, Manitoba, different First Nations, some organizations, PAW, Saskatchewan, Cross Lake, TCN, Fox Lake, Regina. It's amazing. So I'm seeing some of your expectations too. Yeah, mostly wanting to know how to write proposals to help your community. Okay. Okay, so yeah, write and develop a proposal based on supporting the needs of the indigenous people in the urban setting and in the community setting. Okay, I'm gonna wait a couple of more minutes and see if what other expectations are there. I like to modify a little bit of my workshop based on what everybody else is saying. This is an interactive workshop, so I don't like to be the only person talking here. I like to modify everything based on your ideas and your needs and what you want out of this workshop. So please. There are a few different organizations here too, related to law. Some of the expectation, healthy communities, harm reduction. Some of the strength, the sharing and relationship that is within each community. Having a great land-based program for the youth. Going for land-based activities. Having a strength by having your language and protection of land and waters. Some people from Jordan's Principle, Child and Family Services, Friendship Center in Manitoba, Thompson. Some of the strength, culture, ceremony, lands. Definitely. Having a very diverse community and that are working together to teach and learn. Okay. Sagin First Nation. Okay. Going back to the bottom. So we have some grassroots organization that do a lot of community supports. Supporting people where they are, increasing their skill sets, employment, bringing organizations under one roof to look at the needs of each community. These are all great. Okay. Yeah, there is a comment about like how there's not so many courses like this, and I totally agree. I think like one of the strengths of this course, as I see it, is like it's very community oriented, and it's all about what you want for your community. And then we're sitting together to see if we can find funding for that, for your community, for your organization. Yeah, I hardly have seen any funding like or workshop that is bringing all the communities together to go through this process so hands-on. Okay. So we have some mental health and addiction counselor. I can see everybody wants to support their community and their organization for healthier communities, having better relation with their land, people, reduce harm, increase employment. Support for Indigenous men, healing, all right. Okay, so I see a lot of different, you know, people from all across Turtle Island here. There's a lot of a strength that you see within your community, your organization, and also everybody's wanting to have a healthier community organization, and there are different fundings that for different reasons that all of you want to apply. So the morning session is actually going to help us find those best funding that match our unique needs, whatever those needs are, how to find those needs, those fundings, and where to start. Becky, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so to be able to identify funding sources for your project idea, the first thing that we do is we find the keyword for us. For example, we are looking for better environment or some environmental programs, or we are looking at health for our community, a better health or some funding for health, or we are looking at counseling or mental health. So the first thing we do, so I'm going to actually share my screen, but first I have to start my Google search. So at this time, maybe you can think about what are the keywords for your needs, for your community, or what you're looking for. So I'm going to share a screen now. Okay. All right, so in this case, let's say I'm looking for some funding for the environment. So I use 3 keywords: environment, indigenous, and then funding. And I'll see what comes up. So as you see here, there are some websites that pop up. They are from Canadian government, federal government. So let's click on one of those. So environmental funding, Canada.ca. So as you see here, they have categorized the funding programs for environmental projects. So I'm going to click on this one. Here, there is a list of funding programs that are available through federal government. Aboriginal Fund for Species at Risk, Atlantic Ecosystem Initiative, some community programs, community interaction program, community nominated priority places for species at risk, eco action, environmental damages fund. Okay. So now based on what I feel my idea is, or what I think my community or my organization would need, I can kind of guess which of these I want to go to. So, okay. So let's go to Environmental Damages Fund. So here there's a brief description of what is that all about. So what does this funding do? What can it be used for? What is the scope of the funding? So there are different categories here. So what I'm gonna do actually, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna focus on the funding that we are using as a template today, which is, okay, so when I was searching originally here, one of the programs that came out was Indigenous Guardians Pilot Program. So I'm going to go there. So as you see, there's a list of what you can find on this page. There is overview of the funding, how much funding was allocated to this specific program, who this funding is working with, what is the scope of the funding, so such as this program will provide Indigenous people with greater opportunity to exercise responsibility and stewardship of their traditional land, water, and ice. And also protecting and conserving ecosystems. There's a map of funded initiatives. They have 3 different programs for three different groups: First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And what are the eligible organization or activities that they fund? So before I go any further, I would like to try this out and let me know in the chat. So you search what your organization or community wants, use the keywords, go to Google and start searching and give me some of your feedbacks. So I'm looking at some of your comments. So if anybody wants to share if they found the keywords they're looking for and the type of funding that might match their needs. Yeah, and there is a comment about many of those fundings are expired. Yes, they are. So there is always a due date for these fundings. So some of them come every year, and then you have to apply within the timeline that they are providing. Some of them are just one time. Some of them are emergency funds. So they might just come during certain, like just one time. They're really fast. You have about a month to apply, and then you know, you have to even spend the funding within a very limited time. So these are some of the questions I get. Let's see. Someone is from UCN asking about the funding related to environmental degradation and climate and environmental change. So Dean, can you share with me what, did you do some research and did you go to the Google and did you find any related funding? All right. So, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and go further into how you look for your funding or funding for your ideas. So when you go to one of these websites, you see different parts. Usually there's an explanation of what that funding is, some of the scopes of the funding, what do they actually fund? And then who is eligible for that funding? That's where you actually find if your organization or if your idea can match the specific funding. So do they fund you as a specific organization or individual or community? And then something about the process, how this whole funding process works. Usually there is an application package provided. That application package might have like forms, budget, work plan. Some of them are provided in the website, but some others you have to actually email them to get those packages. And there's something about the due date and of that funding. Some fundings have a specific due dates and come every year. Some fundings are every few years. Some others, they don't even have any due dates. So I'm going to share a screen right now again. So let's. So when we go to this web page, you'll see the overview of the program. That how much money actually been allocated by the federal government to this program? What is this program funding? What type of activities this program is funding? The scope of this program, as you see here, is looking at Indigenous rights and responsibilities in protecting the land and water and ice and ecosystems within their communities, maintaining economies, sustainable economies, and then also having an aspect of Indigenous culture. So this specific program right now only funds First Nations, as you see here. This is an individual approach for First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. So what you're seeing here is all overview of this specific funding and what scope that has. So we have First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, but all those funding has been allocated in the past. The only one that's left is the First Nations one. So this is specific funding only looking at First Nations communities or organizations for another year. So what are the eligible organizations? As I said, this is the part that you're looking at your eligibility. So where are you from? Are you from an organization? Are you from community? What is your relationship actually with your community and community members and with your community leadership and who you're representing? So what this specific funding is looking at is Indigenous communities, nations, governments, and representative organizations. And then when you are looking within the eligibility, you're also looking at the eligible activities that you can actually get funding for. So when you have an idea, you are looking at the environment, you are looking at guardianship of your environment, but what do you want to do? Do you want to do a research experiment? Is that a survey you're going after? Are you trying to monitor certain environmental factors? Is that about Indigenous knowledge, collecting Indigenous knowledge around environment? Is this about conservation planning? Is there about like education, outreach? Are you trying to educate people about the environment? So that is where you actually can find funding sometimes for land-based. So as I said, you know, some of this wording might be very general. And then if you are looking into a specific, then you won't be able really to find a specific funding for. So you have to go a little more general. Sometimes you need to go a little more specific. So I like to see more of your, you know, what was the result of your search after going, you know, over this page. So all the areas that they're funding or the activities that they fund is here. So the best management practices, capacity building, training, and then there is information about the application process. So in this case, in this specific funding, they are actually looking at you emailing them, and then they will send you the package. And it has to be, the whole application process, the application has been developed with Indigenous groups. And to get more information, the only way is to email them. But there are some other fundings that they have all this information already in their website. And you can even start and end the application in the website. So there are differences here that it's good to be aware of. So, and then there's some information about like how this funding been there for a few years. There is, an email address for more information, the contact there, and then some related links. So it's called Nation Rebuilding Program, and it's open right now. So you can start applying. So again, just giving you some kind of idea of how the federal fundings are, how they look like, how's the web page look like. A little bit about the program. They're saying they're looking for a more transformative agenda to renew their relationship with Indigenous people, to rebuild Indigenous nations, and looking at their own unique needs of their communities that goes towards self-determination. So as you see here, since 2018, they've put some budget for 5 years that can support this program within these 5 years. And then a little bit about the objectives of this funding. Again, it's for nation rebuilding. And I really like that it's looking more into self-determination and independence and reestablishment of the nations, because I think in any funding, you probably look for that as the backbone, as the skeleton of your funding. That what is really important is like it's all about your independence and your community's independence, right? So, and this funding actually addresses that. It looks at sense of unity within Indigenous nations. What are the priorities for action and approaches to the issue will be, and the reduction in duplication of, how you resolve those issues. So working more as like a collective and the communication in a nation level. And then information about who can apply. So here you can find if you are actually eligible based on where you're from, which community, which organization. So they will prefer for this funding a multiple Indigenous community funding. So some of the eligible applicants are Indigenous nation entities, can be collectives, nation member communities, it can be on behalf of a nation, it can be a Métis, it can be an Indigenous organization, or self-governing Indigenous governments. And then information about the deadline. So this is open till December 14, 2020. And usually these deadlines are very important when you actually start to work on your funding, because there's no way that you can go over the deadline, the due date. Some of them even have the time and the time zone. So for example, for Guardians program, it's right at 11:59 PST, so Pacific time zone. So, and they already mentioned that they would answer to questions up to, I believe it's like 3 p.m. their time zone, which is again Pacific time zone. So, and then what are the initiatives that are eligible? So what, if you have an idea, is that idea eligible for this funding? So, so again, they're preferring like more than one indigenous group. So yeah, so I just started reading this, so I don't want to go too much into details because I don't have those details either, but just to know that most of this information can be found in their, you know, in the website of the funding. They also here, they have the ineligible initiatives. Sometimes you find this information in the website. Sometimes you have to ask for the application package, and then you find those information in the guidelines section of the application package. So yeah, there, you know, some of the ineligible initiatives in this case is if you're wanting to do community planning, or if it's about archaeological conservation activities, and some other ones that you can definitely look in the website. And then what are the expenditures that are eligible for those activities? Usually, you know, when you have the eligible activities, you can guess if your budget, what items you can put on your budget, because the activities and the you know, budget are very related. So you have to see like, okay, so for example, in this case, they want engagement between different communities and organizations. So in their in the list of their you know, goal or in the eligible activities, and then expenditure is also related to that. So you can put budget for that specific activity into your budget section of the application. So if it's a salary, accommodations, hardware and software that are you need for that, and others that are listed here. And then some explaining what are their proposal review process in their website. Again, some of this information could be found in their application form or the guideline, but majority of time you can actually find this information in the website. When you were reading that, you can figure out if, you know, you want to go ahead with your idea with this specific funding. So are you, you know, do you have all those eligibilities? Can you reach the deadline? And then the requirement for the proposal. So it's not necessarily always just the application form and budget and timeline or work plan. Some, you know, want some other, some of the fundings have other requirements. In this case, they have few different requirements, such as, you know, additional to application form, they want like details on your professional fees. And then if there is any other public servants that has been involved, and any other, you know, requirements that you might have to be able to apply for this funding. So, and then there is a contact information. Usually you can ask any questions, contacting the email address that's here. And then, you know, related links. So again, thanks, Larry, for sharing this. This goes hand in hand with any other funding that you're looking for. So, all right, so I'm gonna stop sharing and ask Becky to share the PowerPoint. All right. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so when you're looking for the funding, so is there anyone wants to share your experiences so far? What you've done so far? Have you actually search for the funding that you want. Do you have any funding in mind like Larry did? And thanks, Taylor, by the way. So yeah, it's good to know that you are looking at the Guardians already and you've already gathered all the information there. So thanks for the tip. So yeah, is there anyone else that wants to share their experiences right now before I move to the next part?
No.
Okay, there is no one there. All right. Okay, so when you're looking for funding, there are usually two different type of funding that comes on. There are some that are governmental, whether they are like either federal or provincial funding. Hello? Is someone trying to connect? Okay. If you're not connected, can you please turn off your audio? Okay. But there's some other funding that are not necessarily governmental. Those are usually the funding that are either come from collective community, collaboration, or some charities, some places like foundations, or it could be like, can you go to the next slide, Becky? It could be like some of the elites that get together and actually start a funding program based on their own experiences. So there's lots of different types of funding that are not necessarily come from federal or provincial government. The difference between these two fundings are usually applying for a non-governmental funding is easier. They don't have all these steps or stages that you have to go through to be able to be qualified, but they're not necessarily also in terms of amount of funding that you can get. Sometimes they're in lower amount. There are some that are funding, more projects with higher amount of funding, but majority of them are for a small fundings here and there. And it depends what are the mandates of that organization and how they're shaped. In this case, I can again share a screen with you. All right. All right. Let's look at, again, the same words that I used before. So when you go down here, there are different fundings that are mentioned. When you see the Canada.ca, that means that comes from the federal government. Same as here. But then you see one funding here that comes from a different source. So, okay, so actually I found this funding just a few days ago. This is called TD Friends of Environment Foundation Grant, which is found by TD institution. And the same goes, same parts that you see in the federal and provincial funding, you can also see non-governmental funding. So there's eligibility criteria, who can apply for this funding. It can be the charities, educational institutions, municipalities, and then indigenous groups and communities. They're looking at a wide range of environmental initiatives, mostly focusing on environmental education and green space program. Such as, looking at a schoolyard greening, parks, and then community gardens, as well as park programming. But, they are looking also, they have some information there and some common questions that has been asked. There's usually that part in every website you go to, which also help you get more information about the funding. So they also mention what kind of expenses they are not funding, which is quite a few lists. So, and then how you submit your application, what are the deadlines? So here, there's winter submission, summer submission, and deadline for each of those. And then when they actually meet to make decision for that funding. So in this case, if it's January 15 is the deadline, then by March, they'll have their meetings and then they notify you by April. Usually in this type of funding, what I found is like most of the process is entirely online. So in some cases, you can download the application form and fill it up. But in this case, you have to start online and finish online. So that's another option that, another difference that I've seen within different, mostly non-governmental organizations that do the funding. So, there are some of these organizations such as, okay, so there's a few of them that I already know. So I'm just gonna do a quick search and show you what those are. So one that we will be focusing on on our non-governmental session will be Indigenous Peoples Resilience Fund. So this is a non-governmental, it's another example of non-governmental funding. It's through Community Foundation of Canada. And then there is a little bit an explanation of who they are and what their purpose is and who are their partners. So let's see. So they're more looking at, you know, when you're looking for funding, it's important to know what organization you're looking at and what their goals are. And if your idea fits within some of the goals of and mandate of that specific organization. So they are looking mostly at social issues in Canada, such as youth engagement, gender equality, entrepreneurship, social innovation, sustainable development, and so on. So some of these foundations are pretty complex. So they are actually different communities that are coming together, or different other, you know, organizations that bring money to that specific foundations and kind of collaborate with the foundation to, based on the causes or parts that they believe in and they want to allocate that money into. And I believe this community foundation is one of those that their funding comes from a lot of different sources. But we will hear more about this in our non-governmental session on Monday. So, and then here, they are actually having this funding that was released not long ago. This is one of those emergency funds. What it means is, like, due to the situation that we are in right now, because of the COVID situation, they open, they have certain funding allocated to this, and then they have a time that they say, okay, from this time now you can apply for this funding for the emergency purposes of your community. And then usually there is no due dates to this type of fundings, but because there's a lot of applicants, it's good to apply as soon as you can, because money usually goes really fast. So in this case, they don't have a due date. And then, okay, so let's go down here. They have an Indigenous Advisory Council that approves all the resilience and governance funds. And then they, this is part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Fund. The range of funding that actually is allocated is between 5,000 to 30,000. And anywhere from Canada, any organization, either Indigenous led or Indigenous serving organization that are looking for resilience, Inuit, Métis, First Nations, all across Canada, they can apply for this funding. And then here they are explaining who their funders are. So there are different foundations that come in together and made this happen. And then there is, you can click and you can get the application guide right on the website. And actually application form is also in the website. So I'm gonna go click here. Yeah, so in their application guide, they explain what this funding is all about and how you actually can get it. So I'm gonna leave this here, leave it for Monday when we go more into detail and this funding. And then if you go on apply now, there is where you can actually download the forms. There's a little bit about the scope of the funding and about the funding itself. So this is to support communities during the time of COVID. The range of the funding is between 5,000 to 30,000. And then who is going to be funded, who is eligible for this funding, and how this funding can be used. So eligible activities for the funding. So some of those are like sustainable access to food, strengthen your local food system, training, infrastructure, innovation in employment, and so on. So as you see, this is not a very complex when you look at this funding, because first, that's from a non-governmental source, and then it is an emergency fund. So they're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to finish the application, send it off, and see if you can actually get the funding. So there are only mostly your name, your contact, where is your project, and then challenges that COVID brought to your community or your response, and then who are you? What type of group are you? So, and if your group or organization is Indigenous led, and how the decisions are mostly made in the organization that you're in. So, and then here they're asking for charitable number, or someone that can be a qualified donee. But I'm gonna leave this more to Monday. So yeah, just a few questions, quite general. The budget template is here. Again, it's not very, I'll show you later this afternoon what budget templates can look like and how, you know, they're different again when you're looking at federal funding versus non-governmental fundings. Yeah, so, and then there is a little information about how you report. If you get the funding, how would you be reporting the funding? So that is one example of non-governmental funding. So there are other examples of what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna, again, look at one that I already know and I've worked with before. It's Thomas Seal Foundation in Manitoba. I'm not going too much into this because this is only in Manitoba, but I mean, like, you know, you can find these links also through your contacts or people that applied for funding in certain areas. They can also introduce you to some of these non-governmental sources that you can find. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and go back to Becky. Okay, so one of the things that our team is trying to do is to bring all the different sources of funding, either governmental or non-governmental, by category into one file. So we haven't really quite figured out how we're going to present this, but it definitely will be an open access file that you know, for every community or every organization all across Canada can reach. I'm going to share what we actually have so far. And I like to also have some of your feedbacks and see what you think is the best way to create such file and share it. What kind of information you are looking for. Okay, so I'm gonna find. So you can share some of your ideas with me maybe meanwhile in the chat. So what are you, what do you think is important to share as a public file when you're looking for different type of funding? What kind of resources you're looking for? Are bringing all of those funding to one single place? What do you think has to be there? Like the web address for those, due date, what are you looking for? Okay. All right. I'm waiting. I'm not getting anything in the chat, so I'm gonna go ahead and share what I have so far. Okay. Yeah, we have an Excel sheet right now that's been fundings has been categorized into different subjects, such as you know, more non-governmental community charities and different areas. You know, it can be education, or you know, in cases such as Winnipeg Foundation, that they fund lots of different areas, but mostly education again. And then cultural and healing funds. And, you know, I just figured out there are some fundings that are not here, and I definitely can add these to the resources and share it in the website. And I think maybe one idea could be to make this more interactive. So if anyone knows of any funding that can bring in, they can add it to this, you know, file. So everybody else can see it. There's Indigenous sports, some of the environmental fundings that are out there. So what we have here is more like, what is the name of funding? What's the website? How much they fund. In some cases, the due date, some of the due dates are fixed, but some of them are changing all the time. Some fundings are coming in, some of them are, you know, disappearing. So this is a very interactive file. So we're hoping to have something like that. So as fundings come in, we can have the information in, and as they, you know, as they are ending, we can actually get that information out. There is like certain fundings that's related to business development, most of these fundings are through federal government. Again, the deadline and website is here, but what other information you think we could actually include here? Let me know. And then some fundings that's related to health. So this is it's quite in infancy right now, but that's what we feel is important to have one place that you can go to and look at lots of different resources that are there and look at what your idea is and how you can match those your ideas or your needs to the type of funding that is out there. Right. I guess we'll end this session and we come back at 2 o'clock again.